Appreciate you streaming in here on Birds 365. Honda Shields in for Johnny Mac today with me, Jody Mac. We're going to spend a good couple of minutes talking about the Eagles, the Super Bowl, the Hall of Fame inductees with our next guest. He is one of the 49 selectors and is longtime NFL reporter, writer, author as well. Gary Myers jumps in with us here on Birds 365. Let me start here, Gary. You, like me, are of a certain age. You've seen, if not every single Super Bowl. I've manned up and said, I really don't remember the two Packer wins at the beginning. Oh, I remember the Jets winning against the Colts in Super Bowl III. But I have very vivid memories of 55 out of 57. Where does this Super Bowl rank that they just played as far as excitement level, quality of football level? How good a watch was it? Top 5, top 10? How good is Super Bowl to compare to all the others that you've watched?
That's a great question to start off, Jody. I would say definitely not top 5. I'd have to put my list together and see if I can squeeze it into the top 10.
Top 10? All right, fair.
I just didn't like the way the game ended, with a penalty pretty much providing the winning points. I would have loved to have seen the Chiefs kick that field goal, Jalen Hurts get the ball with like a minute 40 to go and one timeout, and see if he can get them into field goal range or maybe even get them into the end zone to avoid overtime. But, boy, I know we'll get into this, but the problem I had with that penalty is they weren't calling it the entire game. There wasn't one defensive pass interference. There wasn't one defensive holding. And to call it with a minute and 50 to go or whatever, what was a borderline call to begin with, I think that really prevents this game from being put among the all-time greats. If they had kicked a field goal and the Eagles came down and won it or tied it, or the game went into overtime, then for sure, an overtime Super Bowl game would have been one of the all-time greats. But to have the officials decide it, I have a hard time thinking that was better than the Patriots Seahawks ending, the Patriots Falcons, the Giants and the Bills, the first Giants Patriots one, the Cardinals and the Steelers. And this is just off the top of my head. I'm sure I can find some more. The Bengals and the 49ers the second time, Joe driving them 92 yards. Those were all better games. This one, this game, the Chiefs played horribly in the first half. The Eagles played horribly in the second half, so it wasn't one of those games where they were just kind of going back and forth because they're both playing great. And obviously, as people in Philadelphia have to be wondering, would this game have been a blowout for the Eagles if it wasn't for that Hurts fumble?
Gary, you brought up the penalty and how it, for you at least, it impacted the lore of the matchup, the lore of the Super Bowl, and when you compare it to other games as well, understandably so. Are there any Super Bowls that you can think of, any big games in the playoffs that you can think of that had the potential of being an instant classic, but because of a decision by the refs, it kind of took away from the luster of it? Are there any matchups, any big matchups, playoff Super Bowl that you can think of that remind you of something like that, or give you a similar feeling?
Well, Tone, certainly, last year's Super Bowl, there was a holding call on the Bengals at the 2-yard line in the last minute or so. I believe the Rams were down 4 at that point. It was a 3rd and goal from the 8 or something, and it gave them a fresh set of downs, and they went on to win the game. On the other hand, the Hail Mary catch by Drew Pearson in the playoffs in 1975, Minnesota-Dallas. That Dallas won that game on a very controversial pass interference call on Nate Wright. And I think that only added to the lore of that game because that became such a huge talking point. I'm trying to think of another. Oh, the Saints and the Vikings, the pass interference call that was not called. That's been another playoff game that was dictated, by the officials. There's just something and what happened last year with the Bengals and Rams wasn't talked about as much, I don't think, as this penalty on Bradbury is going to be talked about, because this was so borderline to begin with. First quarter of the third game of the season, this was a borderline call. Less than 2 minutes to go in a suit and tie game in a Super Bowl. I just don't see how you call it, because first and foremost, they hadn't been calling it the entire game.
Yep.
This is not the first time something in the game had happened like that. I mean, Bradbury should have been called, I think it was in the second quarter.
The first thing I thought of when I saw the flag come out, when they said there's a flag, oh, by the way, I never saw the flag. It wasn't shown on TV. You had to be told that there was a flag on a play. And then they showed the replay. I said, oh, that's soft.
Well, Jody, you saw the flag on the replay, and he threw it once the ball, I thought he threw it once the ball landed in the end zone. I didn't see him throw it when there was that contact. I could be wrong about that one, because, when they were showing the ball landing in the end zone, I saw a flag. I thought that's when it came out, but
don't know exactly when the referee threw it. So, but we can all agree that it was just a soft call.
Yes.
Jalen Hurts was not soft. I think he actually outplayed Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl. Mahomes gets the MVP because his team won.
Yeah.
And Mahomes played very well, but I thought Hurts played phenomenally. The fumble included, which was a huge part of it. Can't give him an A+, but you can give him an A-. I thought he was that good. How much is it going to cost the Eagles? That they're going to have to give him a contract extension, which is going to be top of the market. He's going to get what Russell Wilson got, what Josh Allen's got. Is this going to end up being a problem for the Eagles, because they're going to try and hold it in check? Is the Deshaun Watson total guaranteed contract going to be a hurdle this team has to get over? How tough is it going to be to get Jalen Hurts signed to an extension for the Birds?
Yeah, I think the Deshaun Watson contract, the teams are trying to paint that as an aberration and holding the line on fully guaranteeing those contracts. You've seen, I'm sure that's a holdup with Lamar Jackson and why that hasn't gotten signed yet. The Eagles have always done a really good job managing the cap, signing their young players to extensions, buying out restricted or free agent years, for non-first round picks, 5-year options to first round picks. So with Hurts going into his fourth and final year of his contract, the Eagles have an opportunity to get him signed to a long-term deal, or deal with it after next season and have to go the franchise route. And then you hope you have him signed by July 15th. It will cause hard feelings, putting the franchise tag on him. No player wants that kind of restriction. So seeing how the Eagles have dealt with this in the past, I would anticipate something getting done in the offseason, between now and training camp. How much it's going to cost them? It's going to cost them market value, which, continues to change with each contract that gets signed. So I would say, Dak Prescott at $40 million a year is probably the floor of this contract, and the ceiling, was it 50, 55? He's going to set the market now on contracts. He's in a perfect situation. They did not lose that game because of Jalen Hurts. They nearly won it because of him. He was the best player. He was the best player on the field. And Jody, I agree with you 100%. The Eagles win that game. He's got the MVP trophy. One other thing I just want to say about that penalty, I thought it was really stand-up of James Bradbury to say, yeah, it was holding. I thought he took the heat off the officials by saying that, once he watches the tape of that play, he might feel a little bit differently, because there's so many people that I respect that have come out and said that wasn't a flag.
We brought up Jalen Hurts' contract, and it made me think about the way the quarterback contracts can somehow take a chokehold or a stranglehold on organization's cap space, and it makes it that much harder to build out and fill out your roster with top tier talent. That's just the name of the game, though, especially in this day and age with the NFL. I'm curious, Gary, you've covered this game for a long time. You've written many books about this game. You've covered some of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Has there ever been a time similar to this one where a position in particular has had a stranglehold on a team's assets like the quarterback position does now?
Boy, that's an interesting question. First thing I'll say is that's why it's almost incumbent on these teams who draft quarterbacks really high should take advantage of their rookie contracts. For the 3 or 4 years, they get to pay them what's not market value and then build a team up around them. Because if these guys live up to expectations, and certainly a guy like Jalen Hurts has far exceeded expectations, they're going to have to pay for it and make up for it by not being able to pay market value across the board to some of the players that they want to keep. I would think that ever since the free agency salary cap system came into effect in 93, 94 in that area, that it's always been, okay, what do we have to pay the quarterback? Are we going to have money to build a team around him after we pay him? Probably never more so than it is now, Tone, strictly because the cap has gotten so high. And could you ever imagine 10 years ago a quarterback averaging $45 or $50 million a year? When you think about it, in the first year of the salary cap, the cap was $34 million. Now you have players making more than that by themselves. So this is a great time in NFL history to be a great quarterback.
Really quickly, Jody, Gary, is there a contract that comes to your mind right now that you could think of like, wow, if that guy was getting paid today, he would be making north of $50 million. Is there a contract you could think of back then that you probably say to yourself, wow, he was grossly underpaid for how good he was?
Well, the first guy that comes to mind wasn't even a quarterback. Lawrence Taylor, the most he ever made in the season was $2.5 million. Wow. And I talked to Lawrence about that fairly recently. And I said, can you imagine being a free agent in this market coming off your 1986 season when you were the
almost shed a tear.
MVP, 20.5 sacks? He goes, they would have had to name it Giants and Taylor Stadium. I've seen lines from people saying, if you played today, what would they have said about you? And they would have called me partner.
Partner, right?
Partner, right?
Yeah. Oh, man.
But, Taylor saying they would have named after the stadium after him. I mean, it's probably not far from being wrong. But, quarterbacks from that era, Elway, Marino, Joe Montana. Joe Montana's last contract with when he played for Kansas City in 93 and 94 was 3 years, $10.5 million. Think about that.
Wow.
Yeah, now you get backup D-backs who make that kind of money if they're good enough to be able to play in the slot. Just
Jody Mack, just think about this. Tom Brady, if he wasn't so unselfish, and he was during his prime years with the Patriots, what he could have been making. He would have been setting the market in 2015 and, even earlier than that. But, he bought in to the whole program there. We can keep this a Super Bowl caliber team as long as we're not paying you what the top of the market is. And whether he regrets that or not, I don't know. I mean, he's got so much money and he's got a huge contract coming from Fox where he's going to make more than he ever did in his football contract.
Right.
But, he could have held up the Patriots but probably would have won fewer Super Bowls.
And, oh, by the way, he was married to a woman who was making more money than he was for a good chunk of that time that he was the face of the National Football League. So nobody's going to throw a pity party for
no,
Tommy
I don't
B.
think so.
Nothing wrong with marrying up, Jody. You got to marry up sometimes.
Yeah. Okay. And I know you did books by he and Brady and Manning together. I don't know if you talked to him recently or not. Is he at peace with his decision? We know he unretired last year. He's done now, right? You got to read on him as to whether there is a change of heart coming in the next month or so.
Oh, I don't think he's changing his mind this time. And the reason for that is I think he's very realistic about the way he played last year. And I remember in 2014 when someone said, how are you going to know it's good time to retire? And I know this answer has kind of made the round since he retired. He says, I know it's time to retire when I suck. And I mean, those were his words. And I'm not going to go so far as to say that he sucked last year.
No, he didn't.
But he did not play. I mean, his numbers were astronomical, yards and completions, but that's because they couldn't run the ball. And, I saw him play a lot of games last year, and he just wasn't the same player. At the first sign of pressure, I thought he either threw the ball in the dirt or he went down. He wasn't hanging in there like he had, trading a big play for a hit like he had in the past. I didn't think he was as accurate with his throws. For some reason, he just lacked chemistry with Mike Evans all last season, which was so bizarre because they already played 2 years together. I don't see him. I see him living in Miami where his kids are going to be. And if he was going to play anywhere, it would be with the Dolphins. I don't think the Dolphins are interested anymore. They were for the last couple of years. I think he's going to take a year off from football, be around his kids. And he's got so many business interests that will keep him busy. I just really, it's a long way of saying I think he's done. And I'm glad for that too, because I just didn't think he was the same player last year.
Yeah, you know, with Tom retiring, it just opens the floodgates for people to say, you know, Patrick Mahomes is the new face of the NFL, which I believe he is. You know, he's the new GOAT. You know, can he catch Tom Brady? You hear all those different narratives. With this Super Bowl, his second Super Bowl, winning 2 out of the 3 Super Bowls, 2 Super Bowl MVPs, 2 league MVPs, multi-time All-Pro, Patrick Mahomes is on pace for an already, some say already a Hall of Fame career. What's been your evaluation of Patrick Mahomes' career thus far? And do you believe that he can potentially catch Brady? And also, do you believe that if he retired today, he kind of has a Hall of Fame resume already? It's kind of a 3-part question.
Yeah. Jody will tell you at our age, you're going to have to probably give me those questions one at a time.
My apologies.
Let me get a pen out here and write this down, Tom.
I should be writing those down. But I love talking about this part of it. Can Patrick Mahomes catch Tom Brady? And this is my answer to that. If anybody who's playing today can catch Brady, it's certainly Mahomes. First and foremost, because he's got 2 already and he's been to 3 Super Bowls. The reason I don't think that he will is when you look at all the best young quarterbacks in the NFL, they're all in the AFC. Tom had to get by one guy every year, and that was Peyton Manning.
Yep.
Now he's got to get by Herbert, who hasn't even gone very far in the playoffs yet. You know, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow. I'm forgetting somebody here for sure.
Trevor Lawrence is growing.
Trevor Lawrence. Okay, there you go. So not only does he now have to win his division, because that gives you the best opportunity to get to the Super Bowl, but then he's going to be facing all these guys. Just look at what he had to do to get to the Super Bowl. He had to beat Trevor Lawrence and Joe Burrow, and then he gets to the Super Bowl and had to beat Jalen Hurts, you know, a runner-up for the MVP. So just getting to the Super Bowl is much more of a challenge, I think, than Brady ever faced. And Brady would not have gotten to the Super Bowl the last 3 years if he stayed with the Patriots. I'm fairly certain of that. And he took advantage of going when he went to the NFC, you know, he had to get past in his Super Bowl year. He had to get past Drew Brees and Aaron Rodgers, but he had the advantage that year of playing. That was the pandemic year where he didn't face a full house in the Superdome, and he didn't face a full house in Lambeau Field, you know, which would have created a much different atmosphere and a much more difficult situation for him. But, you know, for the most part, for the 20 years of his career, at least the first 15 or so before Peyton retired, it was really just one guy he had to get past for the most part. And because Patrick faces so many quality quarterbacks in the AFC, I think it's much tougher. I know that was one of the questions. Hit me with 2 and 3.
Oh, I mean, no, that satisfied me right there.
Okay,
that was great.
I remember one of them. Hey, non-senior moment for Jody McDonald. Thank you very much. Is Mahomes already a Hall of Famer?
Oh, okay.
It blows out his knee tomorrow. Can never play football again. Breaks his hip. Whatever. Can't play. Did he do enough so far
and to add to that
career to be a Hall of Famer?
Oh, no, Dan, I'm not going to remember your part now.
Just really quickly, Terrell Davis made it to Hall of Fame. Only played
that's exactly, Tony. It's exactly what I was going to say. If Terrell Davis is in with 4 good seasons, and he got in because of his 2 playoff runs, 1 Super Bowl MVP. If Terrell Davis is in, then if Patrick Mahomes announces tomorrow he's retiring in my opinion, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. I only wish good health for Patrick because I want to see what he can do and how much Andy and Brett Veach can keep that team intact. I want him to have the best shot to be as great as he can be. And the two factors are his health and the quality of the players around him. He proved this year he can win without an elite receiver.
True.
Other than Travis Kelce. They did not replace Tyreek Hill. I mean, they put together some nice pieces around him, and who knows what Kadarius Toney will become if he can stay healthy, because the Giants drafted him thinking he was going to be Tyreek Hill. They just couldn't keep him on the field, and they got fed up with him. And you saw what he can do in that punt return. He had a couple of games for the Giants last year, particularly in New Orleans and Dallas, where he was dynamic, and they just couldn't keep him on the field. So he's the kind of player, and he's on that rookie contract for another few years, that with a full training camp in Kansas City, he can give him that weapon. But I think if there's anybody playing today that can be Brady, it's Mahomes, and he's got a head start on everybody because he's got the 2 championships already.
Agreed. And I thank Tone for taking the question that direction, because now it leads directly into my next question. Great. I don't like agreeing with Deion Sanders, and he's an obnoxious jerk most of the time. But I think he's actually got some legs to stand on here.
All right, who do you have a problem with on the Hall of Fame class this year?
Yeah,
I knew you were going there.
That's where I'm going.
All right, tell me who you got a problem with.
You know how big a Klecko guy I am, and I'm ecstatic that he finally got in. And he went all the years that never got in the front door. He had to come in the side door. Who the hell cares? He's in. And you know how big a Klecko guy I am. But 9 more guys this year. It seems like the final 5 finalists get in en masse every year. The senior/contributor went to a pretty big class of 4 this year, so it is a big class. Is it just too easy to get into the Hall of Fame? Deion, of course, being the loudmouth that he is, overstates it, and you need an upper level and a lower level, and he comes off like the pompous jerk he is. But I think underlining, he's got at least a legitimate point. Are we getting too many large classes of Hall of Famers, and is it bringing down the overall quality of the Hall of Fame a little bit?
No, I don't think so. And if Deion says it, I automatically disagree with it.
Oh, I didn't go that far. I disagree with him, not as far as you.
Think about this. There's been about, I don't know the exact number, 20 to 25,000 players in NFL history, including the coaches, general managers, owners, contributors. There's about 370 in the Hall of Fame. Now, I used to be really good in math. Tone, you're a lot younger, so you're probably really good in math still.
I'm still trying to stay sharp. Trying.
370 out of 25,000 to me doesn't necessarily mean we're putting too many in. The reason there were 3 seniors, and there'll be 3 seniors for each of the next 2 years, we have such a backlog of seniors who, for whatever reason, didn't get in as modern era candidates that really are deserving. And I put Joe Klecko definitely in that category. I don't know how he went to 20 years as a modern era candidate without getting in. I wasn't on the committee at that point. But trust me, when we narrow it down to the final 15, it is a really difficult decision to cut it to 10, and then even harder to cut it to 5. And there are some good players that are in the queue waiting to get in that I think deserve it. I would have a really hard time, objectively speaking here, of arguing against any of the 5 guys that got in this year. I'm talking about the modern era guys. I'd like to know if of those 5 guys, who do you either think didn't deserve to get in ever, or who should have had to wait longer?
Yeah, I got no problem with the first timers. That's for damn sure.
No, I mean, Joe Thomas and Darrelle Revis, Zach Thomas, DeMarcus Ware. Who am I forgetting? God.
Rondé Barber got in.
Rondé Barber. I'm sorry. Yeah, Rondé Barber.
My only knock on Rondé is I thought Eric Allen was as good as Rondé Barber, and we're still waiting on him.
You thought who was? I'm sorry.
Eric Allen.
Oh, Eric Allen. Okay. Well, that's your Philly bias. So
absolutely. Guilty as charged. Philly bias. But, oh, by the way,
don't
he
you
went to the
remember
Raiders and the
Rondé
Saints. It was pretty damn good there, too.
Well, don't you remember Rondé running back that pick six against the Eagles in the championship game?
He made it into the Hall of Fame on the backs of an interception.
Well, he had
good job, Gary. Way to rub salt in the wounds to the bleeding at the Eagles fans for the Sunday loss to the Chiefs. Thanks, bud.
Yeah, well, sorry. Rondé had a lot of touchdowns in his career. I can't remember the exact number, but when I heard it this year, when it was brought up in the conversation, it really makes you think. Plus, he had a lot of sacks.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
I think the sacks are what got him in, and that was kudos and credit to his coordinator who let him blitz.
Yeah. But I just think there's so many guys that are deserving of being in. I know when you turn around and you look at baseball and they put one guy in, and Scott Rowland, I think if you're going to make an argument of too many guys getting into the Baseball Hall of Fame, this year would be the argument because, I'm a big baseball fan, as you know, Jody, and I never looked at Scott Rowland and said, I'm watching a future Hall of Famer.
Nor did I. I can put my Philly bias aside on that one and tell you, Rowland close, but no, he's just short for me, and he's going to go in. So, that's why I asked the question. That's why I think Deion has at least got a leg to stand on in making the point.
What Deion's getting hung up on is the total number. When you're looking at the 5 modern era guys, I think they're all extremely deserving, but it makes it seem like we're putting so many in when you add in the 3 seniors and the contributor. You go, wow, 9 guys. That's a lot, and it is a lot.
Hall of Fame class,
but it's really, it's 5 by the modern era committee. It used to be 2 seniors and a contributor, and then the next year was 1 senior and 2 contributors. And we decided there were much more deserving seniors than there were contributors after we established that category a few years ago, because they all used to be grouped together with the modern guys. And we've kind of, I don't want to say run out of really qualified coaches and contributors, but I think the ones that are deserving to be in are now in. And maybe on the contributor coach side, we can put them back in the modern category so we don't guarantee a spot there every year. As far as the seniors, I'm good for another 2 years of putting 3 in. We get a list of 150 guys to start with. And I don't have a hard time narrowing it down to 25 and then to 15. But there's been some strong cases made for some of these seniors that are still waiting.
Gary, I want to take a slight pivot.
Okay.
You've covered this game, like I said before. You covered it for a long time. You've written many books covering this game, and you've most notably covered one of the most prolific rivalries in the NFL, and that's the Brady and Manning era. Is there any rivalry that you see today that has potential to being maybe on par with the Brady Manning, or maybe even coming close, or potentially exceeding it?
Yeah, I think that's something to look forward to. And first of all, it has to be 2 guys who are playing in the same conference, because what makes the rivalry great is when they meet in the playoffs. So I think you have the beginning of one now between Mahomes and Joe Burrow, because they've met in the playoffs in the AFC Championship game 2 years in a row.
Mm-hmm.
I would throw Josh Allen in there because, he's now played against Patrick twice in the playoffs and against Burrow once. Those are the 3 guys whose teams look like they're built to last as much as a team can be built to last in this era. That each year for the next few years, I think we're going to project each of those 3 teams to be in the playoffs, which obviously increases the odds that they're going to meet in the playoffs. But also the way the NFL formula scheduling is set up, where if you're not playing a certain division each year within your conference, some of the wild card games are the first place teams in the conference that you'll play. So, next year we will have Mahomes and Burrow and Mahomes and Josh Allen and Burrow. So it gives them an opportunity to build on that. Brady and Manning played 17 times. Brady led at 11-6. Manning led at 3-2 in the playoffs, and he won the last 3 meetings between the two of them in the playoffs, which were all in AFC championship games. So whereas it was one-sided for Brady in the total numbers, in the playoffs, which is what we all really remember, the last 3 times they met with the Super Bowl on the line, once when Peyton was in Indianapolis and twice when he was in Denver, and Tom being obviously in New England all 3 times, Peyton won all 3 of them. And then he went on to win 2 Super Bowls, his only 2 Super Bowls. So, I mean, that's what made the Brady Manning one really special, is 5 times in the playoffs. And Patrick is off to a great rivalry with the other 2 guys. So I would say, yeah, I mean, there's a good chance of a Brady Manning rivalry because these are young guys who play on really good teams.
Final word: someone has to be Phillip Rivers in this situation. I don't know if it's going to be Josh Allen. I don't know if it's Burrow, but right now it's looking like Mahomes and Burrow are the main 2, and Allen is on track to being that odd man out, that 3rd wheel. I guess you'll say.
Yeah, I mean, until Josh Allen gets to the Super Bowl, he's Phillip Rivers. I love that analogy because that's what it is at this point. But these are young guys with a long way to go. In 3 years, we might be saying, hey, Josh Allen's got 3 Super Bowl championships. He's got more than Mahomes. Who knows?
All right. No, the wait is still on for your Giant book. Once Giant tying the 86 Super Bowl great team to the rest of their lives and what transpires and how they still stay connected. How many more months we got to wait for this next Gary Myers outstanding NFL novel?
I wish it was just a month, but it's coming out on September 12th. As you start to say, it's called Once a Giant, a story of victory, tragedy, and life after football. And it's the most important book and the best book I've ever written.
Nice. Because
it's about such an important topic. Players in their 50s and 60s, and what is their life like in these years after football. And whereas I decided to write about this 86 Giants team because I know it so well, and I know what a brotherhood it became and it still is, which really makes the story unique, is how close these players are still. With Harry Carson as their captain for life. First phone call when a player has a problem is they call Harry, and he rounds up the troops, and they all take care of him. But it's really a story that football fans in general, you don't have to care about the Giants or like the Giants, because the stories in the book really relate to the 86 Eagles or the 86 Cowboys, because although I didn't write about those guys, what these players are experiencing, I'm sure is exactly the same as what those other teams, those players of that era are experiencing. And one thing, Philly-centric, I have to tell you this story. You guys might know it, you might not. The 1984, I believe, the USFL supplemental draft, I think that was the year of the supplemental draft, where the NFL kind of sensed that the USFL was going to go out of business. So rather than having like a free-for-all, they had a draft of the USFL players that, like, when their contracts are up or if the league folded, each team would have the rights to a player. Giants were picking third. The first player picked was Steve Young. Second player picked was Mike Rozier. Giants are picking third. On the board was Reggie White and Gary Zimmerman. Bill Parcells stood on a table and pleaded with George Young to take Reggie White. The Giants had a horrible offensive line. George Young said, nope, I'm taking Gary Zimmerman. Gary Zimmerman doesn't play for the Giants. He refuses to play. They trade him to Minnesota for 2 second-round picks. George made very good use out of the 2 second-round picks. But can you, Tone DeShields, and you, Jody Mack, imagine Reggie White on the left side of the Giants line and Lawrence Taylor on the right side of the Giants line? It came this close to happening, and if Bill Parcells was calling the shots, as he did in New England and in Dallas and later with Miami, if he was calling the shots with the Giants, 100% Reggie White would have been a New York Giant.
As the football guys say, you can't have it all. You can't have it all.
you had told me that story previously. If those are the kind of stories you're going to get, even Eagle fans are going to want to read.
That's tremendous.
Once a Giant story of victory, tragedy, and life after football comes out in September. One last note: you accused me earlier of Philly bias. I'll tie it in together here. Chris, Phil Simms, part of your story.
Yeah,
I feel badly for him because he's got Chris Simms as his son, who just, if there is a bias, oh my God, he can't get over not rating Jalen Hurts as one of the top quarterbacks in the NFL. He continues to dig a hole for himself by saying that, the easiest job in the NFL is being the quarterback of the Philadelphia Eagles. So Jalen Hurts could do it. Gardner Minshew could do it. Well, they tried that. They went 0-2.
Yeah.
So, yes, when you talk to Phil before the book comes out, give him my condolences.
I've known Chris since he was old enough to walk, and Phil used to bring him into the Giants locker room. Literally, I've known him since he's an infant, and I really like him, and I'm proud of him, what he's turned, the career he's had, and he might have had a better career in the NFL if it wasn't for the spleen injury when he was in Tampa. But he also was standing on the table saying that Zach Wilson was better than Trevor Lawrence. So he's got a couple there that are really hard to defend. But I do respect his opinion. Otherwise, but the one that really sticks out, and this is probably 8 or 10 years ago, and this is Tom Brady's prime. And I heard him on the local radio here, Jody, saying that Tom Brady wasn't a top 5 quarterback. And it's like 2012 or 13, right in the middle of when he's still getting to lots of Super Bowls. And I go, Chris, young man, I think you need to talk to your dad a little bit.
Yeah, he's not spending enough quality time with his father. Knows a little bit better.
But I will say this about Jalen Hurts. When I first saw him play for the Eagles, I did not think he threw it well enough to have the success he's had now. I was completely wrong, and I'll admit it. That touchdown pass he threw to A.J. Brown. Now, I know he was trusting Brown to make that catch because he was bigger and stronger, and you want to give your best players an opportunity to make plays, but that was still a great throw and putting it in a perfect location. This guy's a big-time quarterback. As long as the Eagles can keep this team intact, he's going to win a Super Bowl at some point.
That's why we like having Gary Myers on, because he admits when he's wrong, unlike Chris Simms. GM, great stuff. Appreciate you coming on. We'll certainly have you on during the offseason when the free agency starts and everything else. Thanks for hopping in with us today.
Thanks a lot for having me on, guys. Tone, nice to meet you. And you ask great questions. The man over here has something to learn from you. From the young fella.
Yes. Unlike
I'm learning from Jake Mack. I'm learning from Jody Mack.
Jody is my favorite, so I'm just teasing him. He knows that.
GM, always a pleasure, brother. Thanks, pal.
Take care, guys.
Take care, sir.
Here with us on Birds 365. All right. We're running late. Come back. Final break. We'll put a bow on the show. Stay right here with us on Birds 365.